All right, so as we start to talk about taking good pictures, composition is really critical. It's really what it's all about, is learning what makes a good photograph or a good composition within the frame of the photograph. If you think about music, you can have a musical composition, and that doesn't just refer to one or two notes or a particular part. That refers to the whole song, right? So just like that, a photograph, you have lots of pieces and parts. Every detail of that photograph plays a role in the composition. It might be a key part, like the focal point that we're going to talk about, or it might be a secondary thing that just kind of adds some texture or some detail, tells part of the story. I always like to show this little video clip of Captain Barbossa from, I believe this was the original Pirates of the Caribbean.
The code is more what you call guidelines than actual rules.
And so the code is more like guidelines. The rules here, the composition rules that you're going to learn, are more like guidelines. You may decide certain times they're relevant. Sometimes you may use one rule and not another, or break a particular rule. But it really is critical that you know the rules before you deviate from them too much. So this project, we're going to get some good practice with it. So when we talk about focal point, the very first and most important thing, focal point, we're looking at what stands out the most. And if you look at this image here, there's not really a strong focal point. You might argue that one fish stands out more than another, but then watch what happens. Boom. Once that little teeny orange fish shows up, that becomes your really clear, really strong focal point. You might have previously, thought rationally that, well, if you have a lot of something, then that's going to be the most important thing. And it is. It's an important part of the composition, these blue fish. But this one little orange fish, that's what automatically grabs your eye as soon as you look at this image. With our photographs, we want to try to do that as well. Create a nice, strong focal point. Sometimes you can do that by using it against a simple background, using a pop of color. Here's some example images from past students for the Secret Worlds project that you're going to be starting, where you use an object, an animal, a stuffed animal rather, or a figurine, an action figure, stuffed animal. So here's some just really nice, clear focal points. Leads us right over to the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds simply says that if you divide this into a grid, the frame into a grid, your focal point should be somewhere around one of these intersections. Somewhere around one of these intersections. Doesn't have to be exactly that. You can see the head is a little bit above, but you've got it offset as well. So what that does is it takes it out of the middle and gives you a nice place to put this focal point. Notice again the simplified background. If you were using a really fancy lens, you could do this powerful shallow depth of field is what they call it. Portrait mode, you're welcome to try. Sometimes it has a little bit of an artificial kind of fake feel to it, but you're welcome to try using portrait mode. If you have an object that's small, like the action figure or doll that you're going to try using, and you get close to it, you should be able to tap on the screen on the object and focus on that, and have the background a little bit out of focus. Here's some other images of the rule of thirds. This image you'll see a couple times. Really strong example of the rule of thirds and a number of the rules of composition that we're going to look at. You've got Yoda over here, close to that rule of thirds. Here's this one again. You've got the head of the snake. Legolas. Love this one with the toy toucan here. Building on this, we just have this idea of avoiding the middle. Avoiding the middle. This image is fine. Beautiful setting. Having it off-centered does something to make it more interesting. Our eye likes to have, it finds more interest when it's not just obvious and in the middle. Here's a nice example. Again, notice how as you look at these images, they're trying to put the object, the figurine, whatever it is, into a setting that makes sense for that figure. You have this house kind of blurred out in the distance, the sidewalk. This is really a really well shot example here. Here's another one. They avoided the middle. They used the rule of thirds almost exactly here. We'll talk about some of this extra space over there. So at this point, what I'd like you to do is pause and take 2 or 3 pictures of an object around you that is experimenting with the rule of thirds. It does not have to be perfect. It does not have to be even turned in. But what I'm just asking is that out of integrity, that you, if you're at home, you pause and take a couple pictures practicing with the rule of thirds. Next thing is simplify the scene. We've again alluded to this a little bit before, but you don't want your image necessarily to be overly busy. Now again, this is a rule that's broken sometimes. Sometimes you do want more going on, or you're doing some sort of journalistic photograph and there's a busy city street or something like that. But many times, starting with a simple background is going to really help you make your image stand out. This is a toy lizard, and look at how they place this on this rock or decaying kind of log. Really nice, mostly monochromatic colors, these kind of reds and browns, and it really simplifies the scene. There's not a lot going on here, but it's really nicely shot. Look at how they really get close in on this. That orange around the eyes, the yellow of the eyes, really stands out beautifully. Nice simplified scene here. Looking up into the sky can be a good way to do that. Next, we're talking about filling the frame. Filling the frame is where you basically get really close up and you actually crop out parts of the image that aren't within the frame, so it focuses on specific details. You can see the eyelashes, the eyebrows, really in detail. Look at that, how it's all by the rule of thirds too. Okay. This one breaks the rule of avoiding the middle, but it fills the frame. Look at all this texture. Texture can be a very powerful thing to use. Another student example here. This has always been one of my favorites. I love how they fill the frame. The monkey there shooting through the blades of grass. So pause again. Pause again. Take a couple pictures where you experiment with filling the frame with an object that's around you. Okay. Very critical to composition is what we call leading lines. Leading lines point you toward the focal point. So not only do you have these obvious wires, but you also have the horizon line here. All of this works really nicely to create these leading lines towards this tree and towards this person right over here. Almost to the point where you don't even pay much attention to this back here because there's such a strong point towards this focal point. Points you towards the focal point of the windmill. Student example here. Look at how these lines on the barn door and the cool texture point you towards the focal point. Now he breaks the rule of avoiding the middle and breaks the rule of thirds, but you have really nice other features that are working well. Even this lines over here are pointing you towards them. The body of the snake works as a leading line. Here, look at how the tail, your eye follows up, even the way that this branch kind of brings you in towards the head. You follow down the arm, follow down these lines here. Sidewalk, leading lines. Leading line right here. Not all grass is leading lines, right? So something like this, if this was in focus, this would not be a leading line. But this, because it's pointing you towards him, these can be counted as leading lines. Even this subtlety here, pointing you towards the figure. Look at this strong leading line right here. Look at how this almost works like an arrow, pointing you towards the focal point over here. Try taking a few angles. use different things, the edge of a table, the edge of a desk. You can even hold up a notebook, something nearby you to experiment with leading lines. All right, framing. Framing is a very critical one. Framing is a great way to take your project up a notch. Maybe you have two larger figures that you're photographing through, and then you have your focal point over here. In this situation, you have the bridge that's framing the people. But if you shoot through, let's see some more examples, through these rocks, framing right here, through the gate. Look at how they shot through the grass to frame this horse here, through the leaves to frame this owl, through the rocks to frame Yoda. This is a neat shot looking up. Almost looks like it's like from the inside of a cave, but you have this framing that occurs of this knight. And for the record, if you have a object that's a little bit more realistic, a figurine, an action figure, I usually think those work real nicely, more than kind of a more cutesy kind of stuffed animal or something like that. Could work, but if you have something available, can be a nice touch. Lead space or lead room. Lead space or lead room. That's where you leave some extra space here in the front. If you were to crop that out, it feels like it needs something extra here. If a person is looking to the side, leave some lead space for them over there as well. We've seen this image before. Lead space. Lead space. All right. Take a few pictures where you practice framing. So maybe shoot through the back of a chair, shoot through past a backpack or out a window. And then practice a little bit with lead space. So even if you're taking a selfie, kind of turn to the side a little bit, try taking a picture with lead space just to get comfortable with that concept. Viewpoint. Very, very important as well. Viewpoint. Bird's eye makes you feel like you're the master of this dog, right? You're superior, you're taller, bigger. Looking down from the tree. There's also eye level. For the toys, it might feel like it's pretty low to the ground. Eye level here. Really neat image. I love how they set up kind of a story here. Rule of thirds. And then you see this detail in the background. Worm's eye is specifically where you're looking up, and it makes it feel like these are giant flowers. Raised up a little bit could be a way to do that. Here, you're looking up through the grass. You've got some framing going on. A really nice worm's eye view. This is a cool effect by having the sun behind the object. Worm's eye. Practice for a minute with a bird's eye view and a worm's eye view. Creative with colors. Look for ways that colors can play off of each other. Complementary colors are colors opposite of each other on the color wheel. Orange and blue, red and green. Just vibrant colors in general can be really nice. Here you have this pop of blue against the frost. This was actually not edited this way. The student it was a frosty morning and the colors were really kind of muted except for the blues on this butterfly. Love the play off of this and the way it kind of echoes in the back. Bright pink, bright orange. Vertical and horizontal. So very important. Try to get images that are, a mixture of vertical and horizontal. That's going to be part of the photo requirements. Depending on the image that you're taking, it feels a little bit more natural in this situation to have this horizontal with a little extra space here. This feels a little bit more tight, like it needed more room. Just very briefly, rule of odds basically says that it's more interesting to have an odd number, 1, 3, 5, than an even number, 2, 4. Beyond that, nobody really counts too much, but just something to consider. Patterns can be really nicely, especially when you break a pattern, can be used really well. Here you see how pattern plays in the shadows. Pattern can also be something like the repetition, and it's actually more of repetition than specifically pattern, but repetition and pattern are similar in that it creates some sense of unity throughout your image. Repetition of the shapes and colors, repetition of the blades of grass. Lastly, try to pay attention to the background. If you can change the angle and make it more interesting to remove distractions, then I strongly recommend trying to do that. Hopefully, I know we covered a lot of ground here. These will help guide you as you start to work on taking pictures for your Secret Worlds project.